Gift by Sue Kendrick. Episode 1. The Rusty Shoes.
The scissors made a soft snip-snip sound as I worked through the old witch's hair. Sorry, shouldn't have said that. It's Mrs. Campbell. But she is an old witch, a mean and picky hag, always finding fault and never as much as a toffee for a tip, though she was always stuffing the things down her throat, even while I lather on the colour.
"Make a good job, Tracy dear," she said, watching me with hawk eyes as I snipped away at her lanky grey locks. "Tomorrow is my birthday, and Mr. Campbell's taking me to that new French restaurant. Very expensive, you know. You have to book weeks in advance, and I really want to look my best. I can still turn heads even at my age," she giggled.
Turn heads. Yeah, right. The old girl would need to shed a good few pounds and lash out on a heavy dose of Botox to turn anybody's head, other than to hide a smirk. But of course I didn't say that. Instead, I gave her a sweet smile. "I've never seen you not looking your best, Mrs. Campbell," I said sweetly, as she preened. She popped another toffee into her mouth and shifted it to the side of her cheek where it bulged like an overfed hamster.
"How kind of you to say so, dear. Oh, I think you've cut that a bit short there," she continued with a crafty frown. "I may have to ask for an adjustment to the bill."
Here we go, I thought. The richest woman that ever comes into short and curlies and screws you down to the last penny. Well, it's not my business, literally, but I expect I'll get a rollicking from her in charge, as nobody argues with old girl Campbell. Whatever. The Lord moves in mysterious ways, my mother used to say. Which made me laugh, because the mysterious ways man's Lord moved in was more to do with my special gift than any divine intervention, and I would be using that gift in a way that would mean Mrs. Campbell would have a birthday beyond her wildest dreams. Or perhaps nightmares. You see, I've always been able to see inside people's heads. I only have to touch them. Particularly their hair, which is why I went into hairdressing. All I have to do is wrap a few strands around my fingers, and a strange tingling starts, and I feel myself growing sort of, I don't know, thin. Like I could slip and fade in and out of their thoughts, a bit like walking through the rooms in a house, I suppose. Anyway, when I'm in the zone, as I call it, endless pictures, thoughts and conversations flash into my mind, just like a slideshow. I've always been able to do it, right from when I was a tiny baby, which is why I knew from a very young age my mother hated me. I saw her smiles and heard her cooing and felt her cool kisses, but she couldn't hide the resentment she felt at my unexpected presence. That is not the way a mother should feel about her child, which is why I made things as difficult as possible for her while growing up. Probably a bit too difficult when on my 14th birthday I helped myself to her meagre savings and jollied off to Blackpool for the weekend, giving her the opportunity to jolly off herself under the 4:20 express to Paddington. This proved to be a massive mistake, as I was forced to live with Grandma, who was an even worse witch than Mrs. Campbell. She knew all about my gift and took good care never to let me touch her. Instead, she kept me running ragged, slaving away in the house, knowing full well there was nowhere else for me to go on my miserable wages. Well, it was just a matter of time, I consoled myself, spraying another hank of Mrs. Campbell's wispy locks, because I had a plan.
"Don't you think that's wonderful, Tracy?"
Suddenly I realized the old girl had been speaking for some time, and so engrossed in my resentful upbringing I hadn't heard a word she had said. "Sorry, Mrs. Campbell, I didn't catch that," I said, giving her my full attention and an over-enthusiastic application of cold water from the sprayer, which fizzed in her ear and made her eyes water.
"Oh, for goodness sake, Tracy, do be careful," she scolded. "If my aids get wet, I won't hear a thing."
She dabbed herself with the towel I offered.
"Do pay attention, for goodness sake. I was just saying Terence has bought me a lovely necklace for my birthday. Diamonds, you know. Absolutely beautiful, with a ring, earrings and bracelet to match. They are supposed to be a surprise, but I saw him put them in the safe. He's going to present them to me tonight over dinner. Isn't that sweet? Heaven knows how much they cost, but you can't put a price on love, can you?"
"You certainly can't," I said, shaking my head, and not caring a fig for love. That wasn't going to happen to someone like me, tied to a vicious old woman, he treated me like a slave, and a dead-end job with no prospects. What a depressing situation, you would think. But far from it. Mrs. Campbell's words had set me buzzing with excitement. My own birthday was just a few weeks away, and as I said, I had a plan. A plan which, when it came to fruition, would be the best birthday present ever and see me free of my miserable life, once and for all. For the past few weeks, I had been putting my strange gift to good use. It was all so ridiculously easy, and I wondered why it had taken me so long to think of it. All I had to do was lift a few strands of hair, and hey presto, I was inside my client's mind, and picking up on the layout of their homes, and more particularly, where they kept their valuables. Easy peasy. Tap into their social routine, and I knew when they would be out, and for how long. Visiting their homes during unsociable hours and lifting their valuables was a doddle. I was so careful not to leave any trace that very often it was days or even weeks before they realised anything was missing. The only problem, it was all slow going. The items I stole were mostly of small or medium value, so my escape fund, as I called it, was accruing at snail's pace. And the risks were increasing, especially after that episode with Mrs. Chan. Unlike most of the Short and Curly's clients, Mrs. Chan was not a talkative, self-entitled egotist. She liked to sit quietly and observe in the mirror's reflection my snips and flicks, her dark eyes and inscrutable gaze, never wavering. As far as I was concerned, this was actually an advantage, as I was free to wander through the secret recesses of her mind, without the annoying hindrance of the frivolous chatter I mostly had to endure. Without distraction, I happily relived the recent wedding anniversary party she had thrown for Mr. Chan. 25 years with hardly a cross word, and a very nice Rolex wristwatch as a loving surprise. Not one of the most expensive ones, unfortunately, but nevertheless valuable enough to give my fund a pleasing boost. They both attended tea chai classes twice a week and often ate out afterwards. I chose one of these occasions. I calculated I would be in and out in less than 10 minutes, which I was, but during those 10 minutes, I got the fright of my life. I knew exactly where the watch was kept, of course, so headed straight for the master bedroom. But I never reached it. Instead, at the top of the stairs, I came face to face with a skinny youth wearing a black balaclava, with the watch and several other items clutched in his hand. It seemed I wasn't the only one aware of the Chan's valuables. For around 3 seconds we stared at each other in shocked disbelief. I was the first to react. The realization that my escape fund was about to remain a pittance of miserly speculation galvanized my limbs into action, and I gave my adversary an almighty shove which spun him sideways and sent him toppling down the stairs. I watched in fascinated horror as his head banged against each marble step, leaving an ever-thickening scarlet ribbon in its wake. He arrived at the bottom in a rapid thud-thud of tangled limbs, and lay perfectly still, and so obviously dead. Even though I was trembling with shock, I did have enough presence of mind to realize there was no way I could dispose of the body and clean up the mess on my own. Instead, I ran about the house, collecting various artifacts of small value, adding to those already scattered around the body. I had to make it look like a burglary gone wrong, which I suppose it was, but of course the tragic accident I was trying to portray wasn't an accident at all, in spite of what I tried to tell myself. I toyed with the idea of hanging on to the watch, but decided it was too risky. In fact, I realized my whole plan was becoming too risky. I needed one big hit, and due to Mrs. Campbell and her bragging, it looked like I had found it. I smiled to myself as my fingers worked through the old woman's hair, waiting for the familiar tingling to start. It began almost immediately. Flashes of Mrs. Campbell's life flickered through her mind like a slideshow. The wide hall of her Beaumont Crescent mansion, number 6, and much bigger than number 4 and 8 which flanked it, like a couple of dowdy bridesmaids. The walk-in closet filled with designer gowns. The safe behind the oil painting in the master bedroom, combination 15-12-61. Terence, Mr. Campbell's birthday. And those velvet boxes, stacked one on top of the other, containing that beautiful and wildly expensive jewellery. I blinked hard and refocused on the cut. It was important I knew everything about her plans. "Oh, what a lovely present. You are so lucky," I infused, sectioning off another layer and letting my mind relax into hers.
Indeed I am, dear.
She preened and briefly closed her eyes, during which, to my surprise and delight, I saw her taking a zigzag route from a small door at the back of the house and threading her way to the garden shed, where she removed a couple of boards and slipped into the garden of number 8. I won't explain further, only that her circuitous route cleverly avoided her own security cameras and involved a sleazy-looking Italian called Angelo, and, well, enough said about that. Fast forward to her upcoming birthday, and I experienced her eager anticipation as she mentally rehearsed her itinerary, which involved climbing into a taxi and heading for the swanky French restaurant where she was due to meet Mr. Campbell, and who, I learned, would be joining her straight from work. Wonderful, I thought. I would have hours to lift the jewellery. But before I could plan further, I noticed Mrs. Campbell had opened her eyes and was staring at my shoes with undisguised horror.
Goodness me, Tracy, haven't you got anything better to wear than those?
I followed her gaze, and my blood ran cold. My flat, black pumps, scuffed and slightly split at the seams, betrayed a thin, telltale line of what looked like rust peeking over the soles. My heart began to hammer. I knew it wouldn't be long before someone started asking awkward questions. I shuffled my feet away from Mrs. Campbell's curious gaze and picked up the scissors. "These are so comfortable," I said cheerfully. "When you're on your feet all day, it's comfort over style." She replied.
Well, if you don't mind me saying so, dear, it doesn't create a good impression. Have you tried Footsie? They have a good budget range. Those are EBs, aren't they? If I remember, I'll ask Mr. Campbell for a discount voucher. He's a director there, you know.
You silly old witch, I thought. Where do you think I got these things from? £9.99 from the end-of-line sale. A load of old rubbish too. Shoddy foreign imports fall into bits after a couple of months. I would have been well miffed if I'd actually paid for them, but of course I hadn't. A quick glance around and straight under my coat they went, but unfortunately not before this big fat bloke with bulldog jowls spotted me. With a low growl he was after me, but I was long gone before he even reached the door. "Terence, sir, sorry. Mr. Campbell won't be able to keep his eyes off you tonight." I was badly rattled by that rusty stain on my shoes, but rather than spend time worrying about anyone spotting my size 3 footprint in the Chan's house, which they almost certainly would at some point, I decided it was now or never. I couldn't wait any longer to make my escape, so as soon as I got home, I leapt into action. First job was to get rid of those shoes. They went straight into next door's bin. Minus the stains, of course. Grandma was an easy fix. She was on very strong painkillers after her hip operation, so it was quite a simple matter to make her a nice cocktail of the various pills and potions she had in the bathroom cupboard. I crushed them all together and stirred them into her microwave dinner. Smoky Caribbean jerk chicken. Nice and spicy, and her favourite. It was her last meal after all. The drugs kicked in almost as soon as she lowered her fork, and she was soon snoring for England. While she was slipping into the land of Nod, I spent the time packing my few belongings and retrieving my passport from its hiding place behind my Smith wardrobe. I knew Grandma searched through my things when I was at work, and if she knew I had a passport, she would be even more suspicious of me than she was already. So far, the passport was the first and only item I had bought from the gains I had made when using my gift. With everything in place, and a last look at Grandma, who was still whistling a cacophony of rip-roaring snores, I set off for Beaumont Crescent, and more importantly the little park opposite, and a secluded bench which gave a discreet view of the Campbell Drive.